Support for this podcast comes from the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative, connecting communities with the resources, infrastructure, and networks to ensure a vibrant local free press.
From KVPR in Fresno, this is Central Valley Daily. It's Monday, March 9th. I'm Elizabeth Arkalian. The California High-Speed Rail Authority plans to reduce its project costs. It outlined the steps in a newly released business plan.
The authority says that, in this draft business plan, they said that there's still a cash flow issue that needs to be resolved.
Coming up, we'll break down what could be changing for the rail project. That conversation in just a moment.
Central Valley Daily listeners like to know what's going on in their community. And coming up this spring is our Corks and Brews event. On Sunday, May 3rd, we'll have nearly 40 different wineries and breweries waiting to pour you a drink. Come put a face to the names of the people behind this podcast. We'll also have live music, a silent auction, and food trucks. Tickets are $75. Get yours today at kvpr.org.
And now to our feature story. There are signs throughout the Central Valley that the high-speed rail is under construction, but for many future riders, it still feels like a phantom project. The initiative has been denounced by the Trump administration, suffered funding cutbacks, and last month, the CEO of the Rail Authority took a voluntary leave of absence. That was after he and his fiancée were arrested on suspicion of domestic battery. CEO Ian Chowdhury returned to work last week, shortly after the Rail Authority released its 2026 business plan. The plan proposes shaving $2 billion from the budget and expediting construction to make the Central Valley portion of the rail accessible by 2032. Today, we're breaking down the proposed plan with Fresno Bee reporter Erik Galicia, who came to the KVPR studios and starts us off.
Well, I would say that the major takeaway is that there are still a lot of questions that need answering after this, this draft business plan that was released. When I was looking through it, one of the main things for people in the Valley is the cost of this and the timeline. So the authority says that it can reduce the cost of the Central Valley line, which is 171 miles between Merced and Bakersfield. They can reduce that cost by another $2 billion. Right. So now they say we can drop the cost down to $34.76 billion, which is a reduced cost from what they presented in August in their previous report, which was $36.75. And so, it's kind of the most important thing, and it's reflected in the report, is a lot of this depends on many things going correctly for the project. A lot of legislative support, and cooperation from local governments. Mm-hmm. And so that is kind of...
Private companies, too.
Private companies, utilities. Like I said, a lot of that work, utility work and right-of-way acquisition is done between Madera and Shafter, but it still has to get done, past that to Merced and Bakersfield.
And I just want to reiterate for listeners, the original projected cost, $36.75 billion, down to $34.76 billion. $2 billion in savings, still an enormous chunk of money, and still extremely over budget. As you mentioned, this new plan says it could save the $2 billion, but with a big chunk of this savings coming from adjustments to the Merced and Bakersfield portions of the project, what are some of the specifics that they've outlined and how they can save money in that area? Did they say specifically what they're trimming?
In the report itself, there's not too many specifics. They do mention reducing costs and right-of-way acquisition, as well as utility relocation, which they have, Ian Chowdhury, the CEO, has said he's going to need legislative support to make that type of work easier. He says those delays because of that kind of work, dealing with utility companies and private landowners, those are two big reasons that costs have gone up in the past, right? So, as we know, they've proposed changing the location of the Merced station. They proposed changes in Shafter, which Shafter was not okay with. It had to do with redesigning the wall, this wall that high-speed rail was going to travel on right through the middle of Shafter. So the authority pitched, kind of bringing that wall down and just having it travel at grade with other safety measures. And people in Shafter were not fine with it. They were like, just stick to the original plan, but that would have saved money and a couple of years of construction time. I'm not sure. I haven't heard what they're going to propose, what changes they're going to propose for Bakersfield. But Chowdhury did say when he was down in Bakersfield with Newsom a couple weeks ago that they are going to be talking to Bakersfield pretty soon. I don't know what that's going to be, though.
Yeah.
The other thing is about this time last year, Chowdhury was in Fresno, and he talked about redesigning the stations. I mean, the station designs are not final yet, right? But there's 4 stations here in the Valley: Fresno, Merced. There'll be one near Hanford, and then the one in Bakersfield. So he said that, those stations need to be designed, basically made smaller in order for them to align with the type of ridership levels that they're going to have when service begins in the Valley. And over time, if ridership demands it, those stations can grow.
Okay.
But that's another thing that they're hoping to save money with.
Yeah. You mentioned Bakersfield and Shafter. I know there was some public pushback in Shafter, as you mentioned. What about Merced? There were talks about potentially moving the station outside the city center. Is that a cost-saving measure, or where do things stand in Merced?
Yes, so they have proposed a new station location in Merced. This is like the third potential location that I've heard of. The first one was downtown, and then it moved up a couple blocks but remained downtown. And now they're proposing a site just off of Highway 99, kind of like southeast of downtown. And it seems it's kind of a undeveloped area. So, yeah, I've seen reporting in the Merced Focus that it's going to save, the authority says it's going to save $1 billion maybe.
And we've laid out this sort of business plan by the high-speed rail. And again, pieces are moving, but generally the idea is let's get it done sooner and let's reduce costs. It's my understanding that the California Legislative Analyst's Office is casting doubts on that plan. Elaborate on that for us.
Yeah. So, like I said, in that previous report, it introduced a lot of stuff, like changes to SB 198, the law that requires a focus on the Central Valley, and a bunch of other legislative requests that the authority has to make that they say would make the project move faster and be less costly, right? So the LAO released its own report. It was actually analyzing that August report from the authority. And so, it cast out, it said, a lot of this hangs on legislative support. It hangs on the authority being able to pull off redesigns. And it just said, it's going to be really difficult to stay on budget because it's such a huge project. It's a complicated project. That report also, by the LAO, said that there was still a $2 billion kind of funding gap for the Central Valley in that August report from the authority. So now that they're saying, we can save an extra $2 billion, it seems to clear that gap.
Okay.
But there's still a problem of cash flow, and it says it in this draft business plan. So the authority has $39 billion. It'll have access to that much money through 2045 because there was a new allocation of cap and invest dollars from the state, right? But that money is not coming, it's coming on an annual basis. The authority says it needs access to money faster to move the project faster, to get private investors to move the project faster.
Okay.
And to, if it's not able to do that, it could throw it off schedule. So the LAO was kind of saying, even though it was analyzing that August report, I think that a lot of that stuff, the concerns that they shared still kind of stand even with this new business plan that addresses the funding gap.
Got it. So even though you're being allocated funding, that's not the same as having cash in hand to get the project going, is what they're saying.
Yeah. And the authority says that, in this draft business plan, they said that there's still a cash flow issue that needs to be resolved. They're pitching a couple new things that I haven't seen up until now. One of them being, in this business plan, you find that they pitch, right? They're floating the idea of if there are ever surplus dollars in California's general fund, that high-speed rail would be an appropriate project to allocate that to. They're going to need legislation that makes it easier for them to bond against the money that was allocated last year through cap and invest. And more recently, we've started reporting about their idea of capturing local tax dollars, sales tax revenue, and property tax revenue in order to kind of fund development around station areas. That doesn't mean that they're asking to raise taxes on people, but they
Right.
want to capture the tax revenue increase that's coming in to local municipalities from their stations being there.
They're getting crafty. And, we've had a deficit in California the last few years, but a few years ago, we did have a big surplus. So if that was to be the situation again, they want assurances that they may be eligible for that. And I do want to note, too, for listeners who might not be aware, the California Legislative Analyst's Office is a nonpartisan office, and they provide fiscal and policy advice to the legislature. And lastly, Erik, so with this plan, will it be up for approval by the state legislature, or is there a possibility that it won't be approved?
I guess it's always possible that it might not be approved, but I wouldn't want to speculate on that one. What I could say is that, these plans, the business plan is required of the High-Speed Rail Authority every even-numbered year, right? And the project update reports are required every odd-numbered year. So this plan right now, it's a draft, right? It's out for public comment through late April, and it has to be approved and presented to the legislature by the beginning of May. Like with a lot of what the High-Speed Rail Authority is looking at, they're obviously looking for legislators to support this, and legislative support is going to be key to, so much of what is in here in the next couple of years. Beginning this year, Chowdhury says that he's looking for a private sector deal by mid this year. When I talked to him in October, November, he was here in Fresno. He said that deal might hang on the legislature approving changes to SB 198, which is the law that requires them to focus on the valley, because he said is that private investors want to focus on other routes, We're going to have to see, how this whole plan plays out in the legislature.
Erik Galicia, reporter with the Fresno Bee. Thank you so much for coming by and discussing this with us.
Thank you.
Public comment is open for the 2026 draft business proposal through April 29th. You can review the plan and leave your feedback on the High-Speed Rail Authority's website. That's hsr.ca.gov. And that is today's show. Today's episode was produced by Jonathan Linden and KVPR with support from the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative. I'm Elizabeth Arkalian. Find the latest local news anytime at kvpr.org.
This is Tanya Mosley, co-host of Fresh Air. You'll see your favorite actors, directors, and comedians on late-night TV shows or YouTube. But what you get with Fresh Air is a deep dive. Spend some quality time with people like Billie Eilish, Questlove, Ariana Grande, Stephen Colbert, and so many more. We ask questions you won't hear asked anywhere else. Listen to the Fresh Air podcast from NPR and WHYY.